everybody through that process. We need to think about things like, would women express the same ideas around health services if there's men in the room? Do we need to talk about people with disability and allow people with disability maybe to be, to self-organise and take part in consultations as a group of people who've got disability? Young people, are they necessarily going to really reflect and share their views if there's lots of elders around? So thinking about how we engage is really, really important. Thinking about who we engage with and thinking about what the needs of that engagement are vital to making what we do relevant and important and useful. Placation, and this is something else I think our communities often suffer a lot from. Invited nominees on committees. I think one of the words in some of the communities is gatekeepers. There are people who sit and talk and act as representatives or voice for the community, where there is no real accountability or feedback into the community, or where that does happen, that's sectional and not generalised. And whilst that might suit the needs of statutory service providers and councillors and health boards, whatever, it doesn't necessarily meet the needs of our communities. More and better participation in decision making rather. Shared responsibility. So not just sitting on a community and listening, but being in a situation where we can make choices which influence the real world, make choices alongside others and for others in relation to what it is we need and how we need it. Delegated powers. Communities have responsibility given to them in terms of service design, service delivery, evaluation. But I think the important thing here is given. I think we're in a position where we have to demand and not just wait to be given. But the idea that we can engage in service design, service delivery is really, really important. And the top one is community control of service design, delivery, and the resources required to do this. What do I mean by that? So if we're a charity or a social enterprise and we want to undertake a piece of project work, we're not parachuting in, we're not sucking information out, going away, thinking about what people might need, putting project together and coming back and giving people what we think they need. This is about really involving people in an ongoing and a proper process of consultation and shaping what happens and allowing the community to make those choices about what those services are, how they're delivered and where they're delivered and what resources are required in order to do them. So I think we all know those bottom rungs of that ladder, the bad access, provision of simple information, and the consultation about services through meetings which are inappropriate and don't really capture the views of the community. What I think we have to do as people in the community, as organisations, as charities, as social enterprises, is really move ourselves up to the top rungs of those ladders where we can. Community control of service and design is difficult. It's not easy, it's complex. There's all sorts of issues we have to come across. But in the end, it is more meaningful and better in terms of what we do in the community than simply being provided with, information or not accessing the services at all. So let's talk about engagement in more principled terms. As I said earlier, I'm not going to come here and present you with a model. I'm not going to come here and present you with a magic wand which says this is how you do it. What I want to do is get you to think about some of the things which are useful in you guys making your minds up about how you need to engage into your communities. You are the experts. I'm not an expert. I don't know your community. You need to think about the needs of your community. You need to think about engagement, consultation. You may need to be thinking about representation and influence. You're the experts. What I want to do is help you with some thinking points. So when we think about engaging, there are some really, really basic questions that I start with and I think are important. So are you clear about the reasons why you're engaging and consulting the community? What's it for? Can you easily define your reasons and motivation about why you're doing this? Who's it for? What's the purpose? What's the outcome likely to be? Can you define who you want to talk to? You know, what is community in this sense? Is it a geographical community? Is it a community of interest? Is it a community of identity? You know, what is it you want to do? Who is it you want to do it with? And when you start to try and identify what you mean by the community, begin to think about what the barriers and challenges they might face or they do face in terms of engaging with any kind of process that you put in place, or any kind of consultation or service delivery or service design that you're talking about. So, you know, it might be language, it might be trust, it might be previous experiences, it might be age, it might be gender. I mean, a whole range of things that you need to think about when you are beginning to develop your own strategies and your own plans for engagement. What's the impact likely to have on you and the community? You know, if any. You know, are we going in making consultations around things like youth services and then vanishing forever? Are we being quite honest with the community, saying we're just trying to find ideas, or are we going in there saying we want some solutions and we're going to put some solutions together and we're going to solve all your problems? You know, the honesty is really, really important from the beginning to establish trust with whoever it is that you are engaging with, consulting, or you know. How long will it take, and what resources will you need? You know, do you have the capacity to do this? You know, if you are going to start a process off, can you see it through? And you know, do you have the skilled people around you? Do you have the experience, the insight? You know, what are the resources? And we're not just talking financial, we're talking human as well, and we're talking knowledge. You know, if you start a process off, finish it off. If you can't see the process through, change your plans. And really, really importantly, what will you do with the information the community shares with you? Whose information is it? Who owns that information? Where are you going to take it? And does the community agree? Have you got permission from the community to do this? Are you setting yourselves up as a voice without really having the consent of the community to do this? If you've got the consent of the community to do this, how do you involve the community in this process? And are they happy about what you're going to do with the information they've shared with you? So some basic thoughts before you start your planning process around engagement. So build a picture of your community first. Do you really know and understand those diverse needs, the strengths, the interests of this community that you are part of, or wanting to engage with, or wanting to talk to, or wanting to do some planning with? You know, what are the main challenges? What are the strengths? Often people talk about the needs of the community of this, or we can't get this, we can't get that. Our communities are strong and resilient and have expertise and knowledge, and these things need to be built on as much as a deficit model. We need to think about who in the community, where are the skills, where are the people with experience, with insight, how do we engage them, and how do we do that in a meaningful way? Yeah, let's not just think about all the deficits, all the, you know, all the problems. Let's also think about some of the strengths that we can use within the community to start addressing some of the issues within the community. Plan your engagement. This is really, really important. I'm sure you've all come across these terms before. Specific, measured, achievable, relevant, and time limited. It's evidence-based you want. And if you are going to engage in a process, then you need to make sure that process is monitored. You know what stage you're at in terms of that process, that people understand that process alongside you, and that there's a start, there's a middle, and there's an end. And that during that start, middle, and end, you are watching over it, evaluating, judging, and thinking about that process and whether or not that process actually gets you to the information, to the engagement, to the parts of the community that you really want to get to, in terms of capturing information or articulating voice. So always think SMART: specific, measured, achievable, relevant, and time limited. So, planning process. what I'm going to do now is I'm breaking these down into blocks which are about you as a person that wants to do an engagement, and the community or the people that you want to engage with. So some of the things to think about: who else is or has been working with the community? Have they got anything they can share with you about lessons or issues arising from the work they've done, the work which is similar? Or is it that nobody else has done it and you need to start afresh? Are there any other issues which may impact the work? For example, some of the work I've done in relation to accessing health for people seeking asylum, some of the issues that you come across and some of the issues that become live. Some of the issues that become live means that there is a need to take that information and work with that information elsewhere. Do I need signposting information? Do I need to work in partnership? So issues from the community: who are you? What do you want and why? What do you want from me? How long will it take? Thinking about effective communication. Are there barriers to communication? What are they? Is it around literacy? Is it around English? Is it around previous experiences? What is it? Is it around gender? Think about how effective communication can be used to break down some of the barriers to these discussions that are required in the community. Do you need written translations? Do you need language interpreters, for example? How will you contact the community? How will you explain your aims? How will this meet or suit or rub up against the community's own interests? Also, how do they contact you? Where are you? What are you doing? Will you listen to them and help them if they bring to you issues which are bigger and broader than the engagement process that you thought you were part of? And how often will you need them? So when you think about planning engagement into communities, it's really, really important to always try and think about some of the ways in which your interventions will be viewed and judged by the community itself, and if there are any specialists or any other things you need to think about in terms of that process. Resources are really, really important. How much time do you have to commit to the work? Is what you're setting out to do realistic? Can you achieve what you want to achieve? If not, do you need to cut back? Do you need to think about setting more realistic objectives? How much will this work cost you? And where are the funds to do that? Also thinking about human resources you need. Are the people there and available to do it? If not, do we need to invest in those, in the people around us so that they can acquire those skills, acquire the confidence to engage and to think, to engage into the communities and to assist you in thinking about solutions. Have you considered costs for the community group? Not just costs in terms of time, but if you're asking people to turn out, to turn up, can they afford to catch the bus or the tube or the train to come and see you? What is it you're taking them away from? Are you taking them away from other important things? Do they need childcare? Whole range of things you need to think about before you actually start this process of engagement, which are important to facilitate participation. And costs covering expenses can be one of those things. What will you leave behind? And if you do leave anything behind, what will you do to keep it live, to update or maintain it? That could be information. It could be links into other services. It could be a whole range of things. But if you are going to leave something behind, how long will it be meaningful for? How long will it be useful for? In fact, will it be useful? Sometimes it's better to be quite blunt and quite honest and say, we're engaging you because we want the information. There's no ongoing process. We just need to understand. And I think that degree of honesty and truth is really, really important. You shouldn't be building in expectations when you engage that you can't fulfill. It's really, really important to think about the impact that you're going to have as a result of the dialogue that you're going to have with community members. Building false expectations and false dawns is not useful to anybody, and it certainly is not going to make your reputation any better. So issues to the community. So we said cover costs, pay expenses. How long do we need to engage with you for? You know, are we going to come back and talk to us again, or are you just here for the one-off, for the odd occasion? Relationships and trust are really, really important. You know, questions to ask ourselves: has a community consented to take part, or have they been encouraged, i.e. cajoled, pushed along? Do they want to be there? Is it important to them? You know, how will you involve the community after the current round of conversations? How can they shape your conclusions? If they're giving you information, if they're giving you their views, there's a duty, I think, to treat that with respect and dignity and the sincerity in which it was given to you. And that, I think, also includes the conclusions that you draw from that information which has been shared. If you are going to act as a voice or represent ideas, it is really, really important that those ideas are validated and consented to by the community and by the people that you've taken it from. Speaking on behalf of the others is a powerful thing to do, but it only has meaning and relevance and only has impact if it is truly, truly, you know, a conclusion that community also agrees with. So when you're thinking about engaging into dialogue and discussion with the community, you need to think about feedback. You don't just gather and take. Yeah, there is a need to think about where that information goes, how those conclusions are drawn, and who owns those conclusions, and what you must do with those conclusions in order to respect the community that we're working with. And if you are part of a team, if you are part of a network or part of a group of people who are engaged into this through charity or community enterprise or whatever it may be, you need to ensure that relationships go beyond individuals, and that's both for the community and for your organization. People move on, people change, people get sick, there are accidents, all sorts of things. And if relationships are only maintained through one or two key individuals and those one or two key individuals disappear, then the relationship is gone. So when you're thinking about building relationships through engagement, it's really, really important to think about a team approach. It's really important to make sure that there's organization or relationship with the community rather than just a personal relationship with the community. Personal relationships are great. Personal relationships can be really, really important for cracking open doors and building trust. But truly, to be sustainable and to have longer term meaning, it has to be an organizational relationship. They have to know you as your organization or your business or whatever else it may be, and not just you as you. The community often in these relationships is quite rightly skeptical. The number of times I've engaged in consultations when I've heard people turn around and say things like, well, yeah, it's the fourth time we've done this year, the other three have disappeared. Why are you doing this? You're just ticking your box because you need to for funding. You know, these things are real. You know, the information that the community often shares is whipped away. We don't own it. It's ticking a box. It's helping the statutory authority say, yes, we did consult. You know, it's helping other organisations say, oh yeah, of course we understand the community. Of course we do. You know, so it's got to be more than just about ticking a box. It's got to have, you know, purpose. It's got to have meaning to the community. It has to be something of use to the community, or the community has to see the usefulness of it in terms of you know, their needs, their wants, and their strengths. And they've got to know what's going to happen with all the information, conclusions, the voice that you've captured. If I move on, if you move on, where's it going to go? Who's going to hold it? How's it going to be used? Okay. So when you have thought about who your community is, and remember the diversity of community, the Equality Act lists protected characteristics. It talks about gender, it talks about sexuality, it talks about age, it talks about ability. And we've got to recognize that when we do engage, that those things are factors. That there are scenarios and places in which people are more confident to talk to you or to share ideas and information than in others. Big public meetings are not good for people who can't talk in public meetings. Mixed gender meetings might not be useful for every community. Young people may not want to engage if their elders are around, and they may not really want to tell you what they think if their elders are around. Elders themselves may not really want to disclose and share information if there's lots of youngers around and other people from outside the community. So thinking about who's in that community, thinking about all those interests and needs is really, really important. That's not to say that you can't justifiably say that we're only going to be talking to men for this consultation, or we're only going to be talking to women, or we're only going to be talking to youth. If that's the purpose of your engagement and research consultation, whatever it may be, with the community is specifically around men's interest, and working with men alone is obviously legitimate. But if you're talking about more widely, if you're talking about voice for the community, representation and campaigning, then we really, really have to make sure that we've got our own house in order. That when we're talking, with the community, for the community to power, that we make sure that we know that we've spoken with all the community. That doesn't make things easy, because you can be in situations where there's diversity of opinion, where there's different interests or different views or different conclusions. Don't be afraid of that. There is nothing wrong with properly articulating all the interests and all the views that you come across. There is nothing wrong with articulating minority opinions within the community, as well as majority views within the community. In fact, it's more honest, it builds trust easier, and it's I think in terms of how we speak to power, I think it's more genuine. So when we've identified the community, when we thought about how we're going to engage, when we thought about the plan and we're starting to put that into action, we obviously need to think about how we maintain that engagement. So are we sticking to the plan? Have we gone off beam? Have we gone off track? Have we lost our way? Are we actually collecting the information that we want? Are we talking to the people we want? If we're sticking to the plan, is this good? Or do we need to change it, and does it need to evolve? Do we need to rethink? Are there any emerging issues which impact or change the engagement? Do we need to change what we're doing as a result of the information, the views and the opinions that have been shared with us? And again, flexibility is good, as long as it is within a structure and planned and people understand what we're doing. And realizing the honesty of what we do, telling people about the limits of what we do, maintaining that trust, not promising the earth when we don't have two pennies to rub together is really important. Being very, very honest and very clear about the limits and the extent of the engagement, and the limits to what we can do as individual organizations or networks of organizations, and making this really, really clear to the community, I think builds honesty and trust. And that's a theme that you need to maintain all the way through the engagement. Okay. So engagement is really, really important in terms of, planning is really, really important in terms of the engagement process. So when we assess, this is the process of understanding who's out there, who we need to be talking to, how we need to reach them, and how we engage them in an effective and meaningful manner, and not just throw everybody into a big room and ask for people to put their hands up. So that's the plan. With that information, that evidence, that knowledge, that insight, we've put our plan for engagement together. Once we've done that, we need to implement it and start collecting that data, monitoring it, and if necessary and where required, we adjust. And then we implement whatever it is we agreed to implement, change when we need to change, and then recollect that data. But I'm going to say this again because I think it's really, really important. If we are putting ourselves out there as people who are articulating voice, if we are putting ourselves out there as representatives, then we need to really ensure that we are truly representing the communities and the people in those communities. And when we are drawing conclusions, we're talking about policies, or we're talking about the need for new policies, or the new areas of work, or new services, or new organizations. You know, we've really, really got to touch base with the community and make sure that these conclusions are conclusions which are genuine and honest, and you know, the community are helping shape and buy into, because otherwise, you know, voice and representation is meaningless. It's just us using their information to shape our ideas and then speaking about our ideas, rather than genuinely representing the ideas, the strength and experience in the community, and the conclusions that many people will have reached already about numerous things, you know. So yeah, feedback, representation, absolutely important at this stage. I'm just going to invite anybody to ask any questions or comments at this stage. Hello. So I'm looking for my my host.
Jacques has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I wanted to find out, when you speak about the community, is it like a group of people like doing gardening, or group of young people engaging in sports, or the community as a whole, meaning including parents, children, you know, like a sample?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The problem is sometimes when you try and define things too much, it's like trying to hold jelly. Yeah. But be quite clear, if you are a sports organisation and you need to collect the views of people playing your sport, then that's your community. Yeah. If, like in Manchester, where we have no black political representatives, and there's a need for a broader political voice coming from the community, then our community is a diaspora. Our community is people of, you know, of black origin. You know, and therefore the questions we'll be asking and the community we identify is different, because, you know, we know within the diaspora community, you know, people from different parts of Africa, vastly different cultures, vastly different ideas. So if we're going to say, well, we're talking on behalf of the community, who is the community in that sense? It's all those diverse groups and diverse people. But even, I suppose, in the sports club, if you're saying, well, we want to collect information about the football players, you know, do you want the views of the parents as well? You know, do you want the views of those people who are volunteering to help, or just those views of those who are playing? The legitimacy of who you're talking to and how you define community is based on the purpose for which you are doing the engagement. Yeah. So if you're wanting to put together a new sports team for the over 15s, there's no point talking to 10-year-olds about it. So let's talk to youth who are over the age of 15. You know, you define in that sense who it is you talk to, and the purposefulness of who you talk to will be determined by what it is you want to find out. I don't know if that answers the question, or I just walked you around in a circle there. But thank you.
I think one of the, just to underscore the point that Steve's making, is that the definition that you put around your engagement agenda in terms of your client group, your beneficiaries, however you define it, is critical and it's important, because in a way, the justification you make is based on that cohort. And so being ready to define it and stand by it will enable you to make the argument that arises from that conversation. What you can't do is answer a question that doesn't relate to the cohort that you're working with. People will have views, and the views will extend from A to Z at one end. But somewhere along that continuum, you are placed. You're neither at A nor Z, you're probably M. And therefore, perhaps the people that you could deal with is either side of M and not Z or not A. So being very clear on your definition of the community is important.
And I think purpose. I think you're right, Carl. I think purpose is really, really important as well. You know, like I said, you know, the one extreme, you know, articulating political voice for the community in Manchester, where we have none, or, you know, thinking about do our youth need, you know, a Thursday night drop-in? Do we need to do outreach? You know, and so the communities that we are working with and defining are often very, very specific, and actually putting a definition to who it is you are needing to, wanting to, and should be working with is really, really important at the start of the process. So you maintain a really clear focus and understanding of who it is that is important to you in this engagement. Okay.
Okay, Steve, I've got two other questions. The first one is from Rabia, and the question is, any advice on how to engage or collect needed information from the community without it coming across like an interview or a survey? I'll do one question at a time. The next one will come from Barbara Grace. I'm going to ask Barbara to read out hers in a second after you've answered Rabia. Okay. I hope I pronounce it right. Forgive me if I pronounce it wrong. But that person is online.
Okay. Hi, Rabia. Thanks for the question. There are all sorts of different ways you can collect information. There are all sorts of different ways you can engage with people at levels which are useful and appropriate to them. So, for an example, there are pieces of work that I'm doing in Manchester where we need to engage with children of primary school age. And some of those are infants. So in order to do that, the way in which we've asked them to engage in the process is through artwork and description. You know, that can be really, really useful. And it is a way in which they can relate to, they can understand. With the older children, we're asking them to do something slightly different. But it all does depend on the nature of the information you need, or the nature of the engagement you need, you know, you're required to do. I would say there is, you know, conversations, friendly chats are really useful. There's a whole series of techniques which I can share with you in terms of methodology, if you'd like, about techniques. So, you know, there's things like body mapping, there's things like peer. So you can train, for example, you know, young people to interview young people. You know, that's a really easy way into trust, because they've got somebody who's their own age, their own peer group, or maybe it's slightly older who's been through it, collecting that information too. But it is, in this sense, an information collecting process. So think about who it is you are engaging with. I'm more than happy to signpost through, I'll get Nicole, I think she's got all your email addresses to send on the tools pack, if you'd like, and with a whole range of really, really useful things. So everything from drawings to, you know, modeling, to conversations, to using interactive sticky boards. I mean, I'm happy to send them through to you, but you've got to think about who you're talking to and what's appropriate for that group.
Okay, the next question, I'm going to invite Barbara Gray to pose her question. It's a short one and straight to the point. Over to you, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you. This is really a good session, and engagement is just at the heart of absolutely everything that I do. So as you say, you have to be so creative. But the important thing for me is that it actually leads to something. And I think my question is, what are the things that you have to consider in terms of costs in putting together an engagement piece of work? Because ultimately, like you say, you want to try and find some funding to make it happen, but I'm never sure about what the items to include.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's quite a, it's as long as it's broad as it's short as it's wide, the answer to that, I think. But I do think it's really, really important not to overcommit. If you don't have resources, then don't try and engage in a process which is going to suck out all the resources you have and push you to a place where you're chasing resources. You know, sometimes the most effective ways to engage are conversational and are short and focused on very specific things. I would always think about the needs of the people that you're talking to. I would always think about what the human time and financial cost to those people are. So for example, I think, you know, the provision of expenses, if you're asking people to travel, is essential. I think if you are working with different, for example, you know, different communities from different bits of Africa, then, you know, English isn't always the lingua franca. Sometimes it's French, sometimes it's Portuguese, sometimes it's Lingala, sometimes it's Kikongo, sometimes it's Swahili. So do we have the resources to translate those bits of information? But also, for example, we could say, well, one of the things we maybe need to do is just simplify the language that we use to make it more accessible to people who don't have English as a first language, for example. It may be that people have, you know, hearing issues or sight issues and require resources, you know, in terms of communications, translators, interpreters to do that. There are places you can secure resources from if you are going to do this. So, you know, Awards for All is always open to suggestions around community engagement for organisations and involved in consultation. If you can put those costs in. I've worked with several organisations who've managed to draw down resources to do that, and yeah, Awards for All is a good place. But also think about your human resources. Do you have the skills? Do you have the time? Do you have the capacity to set out on a huge piece of work, or would it be better in the first instance to start small, start focused, start with a small group and learn from that? Because it's going to be a learning journey for people as well. So resource planning is really, really important. If you can't access the resources, think about maybe reducing what it is you want to do to make it more meaningful and useful and deliverable, I think. But again, Barbara, I don't know if I've answered.
Yeah, no, that's useful. And I think the other side of it then is just about doing the analysis and any tools that you have for that to bring the information together. So that's where it can be difficult.
Can I just, before I bring Sherry on, I'm going to ask you, Sherry, if you'd raise your query. But just before that, Barbara, the other thing that sometimes people fail to capture in terms of a cost element in this is the actual presentation of your findings. And so the cost of producing a publication quite often is overlooked, and the presentation of your findings can be enhanced in terms of its receptiveness if you had that resource to do that bit extra. So it's often something that people overlook quite generally, is that when it's done, could you have done it this way? Could you represent it in some form of infographics, which costs? And therefore, thinking about that element at the end of it might be also a cost you may want to think about.
Yeah, I think as well in terms of what you want to do with the information, how you want to shape and present it, something you think right at the beginning. And again, some of the process I've been involved in, there's been no written reports. What we've managed to do is get, for example, young people working with youngers up to the age of like 18 to do short presentations. It might be musical, it might be art, as a way of delivering their views and speaking that truth in this case to local authorities. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be written. And maybe sometimes writing it down on a piece of paper is not the best way to do it. It might not be the most impactful. It might not be something that the people you're engaging with want to do either. They might want to take it a different direction, do it in a way which is more, you know, suitable to their skills and a way which is more meaningful to them. Right. But again, the resources for that are important.
Sherry, if you've got a dilemma.
I have a dilemma.
It's probably best if you explain the dilemma.
So in our borough, we don't have a Black group that delivers services for our Black community. And I've been here for 10 years and I've been trying to work with the council to set this up. So because of COVID now, they were quite interested, wanted to get involved. We invited them along to our meetings. They came along to our meetings. They said, we have a pot of money that we'd like to, you know, give to you. but before we give you the money, we'd like you to do some stuff. So we did all the stuff they asked us to. They kept moving the goalpost. At the moment, I'm just kind of like really fed up with them. You know, they took our questions and we said we were going to do a community engagement piece of work and do a survey. They promptly put a survey out without even discussing that with us. And now they've also put the money that they were going to offer us out to tender without discussing that with us either. So I'm kind of basically at the stage where I'm thinking, well, you know what, let's go and find our own funding and let's set this up ourselves and let's forget about the council, because it looks like, you know, when you were talking about, you know, them parachuting in and taking the information and then setting up a project, that looks like exactly what they've done in this situation. So how do I diplomatically tell them to, you know, get lost?
Right, well, okay. I would just email them, say, really don't engage in this process. It's not representative and it's not fair.
Right.
But what I would do is think about what your plan B is.
Yeah.
Sherry, are you a London based?
Yeah.
You're not going to disclose which local authority?
Oh, I'm happy to.
Okay.
I don't have any problems. It's Islington.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same up and down the country where there is there's no black representation in terms of senior management and there's no black representation in terms of senior office members.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a common theme. A lot of white people don't get it. They don't understand what it is they're doing and they're following instructions and so on and so forth. Self-organisation is the way. The only way you're going to get them to change their mind is when they need to.
Yeah.
And the only way they're going to need to is when there's significant pressure being exerted on them.
Right.
And that pressure, I'm assuming, is going to have to come from you. And you need to think about how, how you access the resources to do so.
Yeah.
What it is you want to ask and what it is you want to prioritise. You can't fight all the battles at once.
No.
If you try fighting on multiple fronts, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
So, you know, choose the issue, choose the area that you want to work, and focus tightly on that.
Right.
And then it is very, very much around building allies.
I do have some allies. There's a building that's part of the whole issue as well that has a legacy to deliver services for Black people, and they're trying to change that legacy. And I think the other problem is that I want to set up a Black organisation providing services for Black people, but they want it to be BAME. But in Islington, we have every other kind of BAME organisation, Bangladeshi, Somali, Turkish and Kurdish, Chinese, you know, and so they have all the other groups, but they just don't want a Black group. So it's a bit of a battle at the moment, you know.
Quite often BAME is used as a way of hiding anti-Black racism. No doubt about that. Absolutely agree with that. Talk to us at Bailey.
Okay.
You want to get something going, talk to us. Have a conversation with Carl, Yvonne, myself, whoever, and we will assist. We'll give you some guidance, we'll give you some support. I'm sure Nicole's made a note of the inquiry. And
Phil's going to help me talk to the councillors, but that was just mainly about the building. I've only just realised that they put the survey out and done the other things yesterday, so I haven't had an opportunity to talk to him about that, but it's just really frustrating at the moment, you know.
But what you need to do is focus your energy. If this is not working, if attending all these meetings with the local authority is not working and they're not listening, and all they're doing is taking the ideas and information you've got and going off and doing exactly what they want, focus your energies more productively. Engage when you are ready. You know, not on their terms. Engage when you are ready, when you've got your allies lined up and when we've got some, you know,
lovely. No, that's great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sherry. Somebody was about volunteers. How do we, Monica? Is Monica online? Here we are. Monica's question is how do we ensure volunteers in consultations are really valued beyond expenses and training? I often find that they get overburdened. Is there any more you want to add to that question, Monica? Or are you happy with that?
Yes, particularly, for instance, we did a big campaign where the volunteers were asked to do video clips for anti-hate campaign in different languages. They had to produce quite a bit of material. We wanted to actually show our appreciation in paying them just a small sum, like 100 quid, for all your time and work, but we were not able to do that. And I just found somehow we've really exploited their expertise, their contribution, and we could not show to say, we know you have a hard time, here's 100 quid for your effort. And I wondered, how do you get around to actually really show, you know, we value you?
Well, I mean, that's a whole other meeting, but things I would say to that are that, yeah, payment to volunteers is really complex, especially in relation to HMRC, employment and benefits. So often there are, if you have that budget there are other ways in which you can assist. So, I mean, I don't know where you're based. Are you based in London? You're based in the north, or
Brighton, southeast.
Oh, I was
by
going
the
to say,
coast.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yes.
for example, one of the things you can do is a training away weekend at the seaside, but maybe you want to go to a city. I don't know.
London.
But, you know, there are other ways to invest
Yeah.
in terms of your volunteers. So you could have like a Volunteer of the Week award or a Volunteer of the Month award. Training and investment. So ask them if there are things that they are particularly interested in personal development, if there are areas of things that they want to explore more, and that you have a small but useful budget which you could provide access to their training courses, to attend a conference, to attend a webinar. You did get charged for this one, didn't you?
Come again?
I said you did get charged for this one, didn't you?
Yes.
No, I'm joking. No, sorry.
Yes, we
no,
did.
so what I'm saying though is that there's a whole series of ways in which you can reward without physically giving money. Things like one of the nice ones I like are volunteer evenings. You know, come along, eat some food, drink some wine, some alcohol, fresh juice, whatever it is you want, and you know, let's enjoy the fruits of our labour as a collective. And it's on us because it's expenses. So the whole different ways in which you can do that without necessarily giving them money.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Steve,
you very
on
much.
that point, can you offer vouchers?
The answer to that is yes, you can. It does pass through, because if you do like a gift voucher, it goes through your books as a payment, as a normal retail payment, rather than treated as salaries or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that's how a lot of people legitimately, it is a legitimate expense, do that. So a gift voucher is quite legitimate as a reward or as an reward contribution.
What you can't do though is give it as a payment.
No.
So you can't say to them, if you complete 4 sessions of 2 hours over 4 weeks, you will receive a gift voucher for £100, because that, in a sense, is a payment.
Yeah.
And HMRC will take that as a cash value payment, and it, you know, but
it's a gift. So treat it as a gift.
Yeah.
Exactly.
As a gift. The other thing also is that I know sometimes we think certification as a award may not mean a lot, but if you were to think through the type of work you're engaged in and the type of volunteers you have, in some cases, some form of a recognition in the form of certification, whether it's an accredited one or just an acknowledgement that they've done something, they've achieved something alongside other bits and pieces, also could have an uplifting moment. And I'm thinking here, especially if you work with special needs, and with not always, but in some special needs cases, the fact that they don't get a chance to be rewarded for something, something like a certification in some shape or form, can actually add upliftment and added value. So just thinking about those creative ways within your means can offer a little bit more.
And also one other thing as well, for a lot of people I work with as well, getting references is really, really difficult because they've arrived without job history or other things, or, you know, the last boss was not good. So, you know, offering to provide, you know, character references and personal references for future is really, really important. I'm conscious of time. Are there any? Have we got a long? Because I'm happy to go through a long list of questions rather than do the breakout. if that's what people want to do. More than happy to do that. Carl, can't hear you.
Sorry, and they're rambling on all on my own. You can see my lips moving, but nothing's coming out. I just want to say, in response to Monica, there is something from Ade who says to you, Monica, you can redesignate those volunteers as peer researchers and offer them vouchers, or you can deal with it as competition that everyone wins. So just in case you miss it in the chat, I thought it's worth just reading that out to you.
Yeah, excellent.
Thanks, Ade. And in terms of, there's no more chat questions, Steve. So it's if you wanted to take open questions, we're happy for that. If you want to break into small groups and have the conversation, then come back, it's up to you.
Yeah, I had a little 10-minute exercise. So we were going to break you into small groups. Again, a thinking exercise about a particular scenario. And the idea of that is not it's not just about answering the points I put across, but also maybe generating other thoughts and other questions about that. So my screen sharing is not working. Here we go. So have a think about this. Are we all right to do this for about 5 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, you could have 10. You could have 10 minutes if you want.
Okay, 10 minutes then. Your local area includes a small but significant French-speaking African community. Starting your job at a local community charity, you've been told that working with this community is a priority. You've been told that there's several community groups and networks within the community, but they only really come together at, community celebrations like weddings or funerals or big musical events when somebody turns up. We do know there's several church groups as well. Your team tells you in the past that it's tried to make contact with this community and contacted one group after another, but really hasn't been successful in terms of making contact and engage with them. What I'd like you to think about in your breakout groups is why might you be having difficulties? What are the possible barriers and what are the reasons for these barriers? What kind of steps can you take to overcome these barriers? And, if you've got the time to do this, what should you include in a short action plan? Okay, I'll leave this up, but I think Nicole's going to send you off into breakout spaces. Any questions before we do? Are we quite clear about thinking around this? Everybody happy?
Each of you was in a group. Is there any group? We only want at least one person from the group to just give a gist or a summary of the conversation. And if you can highlight any sort of questions, any challenges that you think will be worth sharing. Yeah. I don't know the group numbers. So do we have, is it 1 to 5, Nicole?
2 to 7.
2 to 7.
Participants, yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to randomly select some numbers. Maybe that's the easiest way of doing it. So get ready. You're anywhere between 2 and 7. You could be up. So 5. Group 5. Who's in group 5?
No.
We don't know who you are, you see. So this is truly random. So Monica, you're in group 5. You're okay. Over to you, Monica. A quick summary of your conversation.
I really would like because Geraldine just came in, it just got interested when we got cut off, because she was saying something about faith groups, which I thought was so important and so interesting, that once you also, sometimes it is good to use gatekeepers or faith leaders or leaders, champions in the community who already have some knowledge. And when you give them the knowledge and they spread it in their community, let's say in the mosque, in the temple, in the church, then people listen. Yeah. And that is also a good way in. That's what we thought. And then Leroy, he also had something to say. Leroy?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would just say that, sometimes most people don't really know who to go to and where to, and who to go to and what they need and how how practical it can be. But I was also just saying given what's happening, the Brexit and the COVID-19, it makes it more difficult for people to even, you know, do anything at the moment. However, we need to sort of hold out and be courageous and strong, because it will pass. And once it's passed, maybe we can then start looking at where things are at, because a lot of project project and scheme will probably dismantle because of what's gone on. If people hold out and see what happens, maybe it be something new energy, new insight, and new way of going forward. But it's all about what's the next chapter is going to be.
Can I just say something there? Because I think it's really, really important that we're ready for that new chapter as well, because the history of crises in the UK is that, you know, there are no diplomacy in me at all. There are some groups who will take advantage of this and run and be in far better positions and pretend they're talking for us, pretend they're doing for us. You know, we have to be ready. We have to be organised. So even if the things that we can do in terms of engagement are limited, then we squeeze the maximum value we can out of those engagements that we can do. And even online, there are mechanisms for, you know, making sure you're a little bit more inclusive. So I know, for example, Google Teams has an automatic script editor. There are other packages as well that can generate, you know, the script as you're talking. The use of you know, coloured backgrounds or plain backgrounds, high contrast, assist people with visual problems. So, you know, it is about getting ourselves to a point where, when that, you know, gun goes and, you know, the starting pistol goes off, that we are in a good as position as anybody else, and there's no excuses for the marginalisation of our communities at that point, because we have it, we're ready, we know what we're doing, we know where to go, you know, and you know, respect it.
Yeah, can I just add as well? I think given you know, the lock-in and lock-out, whichever way you want to put it, it gives an opportunity for people to engage. A lot of Zoom communication and conversations taking place, and I think this is an ideal time. It's happening in the faith groups, it's happening in all different groups where, you know, even social group people zooming in and having this more intimate conversation and opening discussion. So that should give us the thumbs up in terms of knowing your people and having the support there and bringing things together. And like you said, once the gunshot is gone and we're at the starting point, we can go forward and be much more together.
Okay, thank you for that, Leroy. And group 5, because of time, group 3, we come down the numbers. Group 3, we've got about, this might be the last one because of timing. Group 3.
Just to share my own experience with members of the group, because I'm leading a charity called African French speaking community support. Yeah, so among the barriers, what we come about were like language barrier, cultural barrier, also trust.
Yeah.
So people won't trust you if you are a stranger, if they don't know background. Equally, people wouldn't trust those they are suspecting that they have already, for example, get advantage on their behalf to get money from some sources and not doing anything. And we said that among the steps, it's like take any opportunity to pass a message across, like through faith groups or through a musical event. So people do listen, especially those who are in need. For example, for our own charity, we try to work more with children, because children do engage easily than adults. And we have noticed that many parents whose children have been attending our activities now are prone to get help from us. So it's also a way of engaging the community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just something on there. I mean, particularly with communities of forced migration, it's really, really important to recognise that you may be going in with a certain, I'm not going to use the word agenda, but certain interests and ideas. That community is going to have a whole heap of other issues and needs. And if they begin to build a trusting relationship with you and see you as a gateway into mainstream UK society, then be prepared to think about signposting, networking, and making sure there's wrap around all of that. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much for those two speakers. It's 5 o'clock, and I know people are just about to shoot off. I just want to sort of thank everyone for participating in the process, for your questions, for your insights. And one of the things we said at the outset, not today's outset, but when we started this whole process back in January, was that we're hoping that the networking could start to take effect through this new virtual way of working. And we're already seeing through the chat channels, people are linking up and bits and pieces, which is great to see. And I'm hoping that the session that Steve has just conducted with regards to you having your little group conversation could also start to knit some of those together. I am mindful of the time, and I've got to share one slide with you all about next coming. But before I do that, I just want to just hand over to Steve for the last minute and just ask him for any sort of passing thoughts that he may want to share before we formally say goodbye.
One of the things we didn't touch on is a question about how you, when you've got your information, you've got conclusions, you've brought the community with you, how you then speak to power. And I think it's really, really important to plan that as well. We talked earlier about the fact that engagement doesn't always produce the results you want, and actually often sharing information allows others to run off and do what they want with it. So it's really, really important to understand who it is you need to engage with. If you're sat down in a room with officials, questions I always tell people to ask: who are you? What do you do? What decisions can you make? Can you make decisions on the information we want to share with you today? If not, who do we need to see? Okay. Do not get forced down that ladder of participation. If you need to speak to senior management, don't deal with a development worker. Yeah. And that's not to say be rude, and that's not to say break bridges, but what it is to say is to recognize who is in that room that you are talking to and what they can do with the information you are sharing. If it is not useful, if it has no purpose for you or the community, politely decline and find a way to talk to power. Okay, it's the same with the health, the same with the council. Okay, it's really, really important to think about who you are engaging with and to plan it. The other thing I would say is that if you do go through this process of engagement and conclusions and have conclusions to represent, brief your teams so that when anybody comes to talk to you about what it is you've done with the community, alongside the community, with or for the community, there is an answer that everybody has. Yeah, what did you do? So a paragraph that people have that we can use and repeat with the main points, the main conclusions, because what the worst thing that can happen is for us to be divided when we've done this work. If we are going to market, and this is what we are doing, marketing our ideas, we need a clear message from that work. Okay. And if everybody starts off with that clear message, then what they'll see is unity. And what they'll see is us having shared and discussed and talked about it. So always think about where you're going to go with that information, think about how you're going to present it, and think about who you're presenting it to, and choose the forums for yourself. Don't be forced into spaces which are of no use to us, and spaces we've been occupying for years, which are on the bottom rungs of that ladder. That's where I'll finish. Thank you.
And I'm just going to share my screen and just pick up on the last bit, and this is really more by way, and you can screenshot this if it comes up. There we go. Oops. To allow you a heads up. This really is a heads up onto what's coming now. We're going to break for about a week to give everybody a rest, as well as ourselves chance to regroup and refocus. We've got a series of webinars coming up that will take us through the end of February into the to the end of March. And by way of heads up, I alluded to this at the beginning, but by way of heads up, the areas that we're going to be covering in broad terms, and these are the strategic objectives, and there are programs assigned to these areas. So it's capacity building support in the more round, and here we are thinking a lot more around effective governance agenda. So that's where that focus is going to be on. We're going to be looking at adaptation of services to meet online digital opportunities. And so we're going to look at things like to do with e-commerce and accessing online platform. Access to financial resources. And here we're not looking at grant aid. We're looking at alternative income streams to grant aid. And you may want to access that when it comes around. That idea came through one of our seminars session when somebody online suggested, I can't remember who it was, suggested there are different ways other than grant aid. So we've explored that and we put something on in place. Continuity and strategic planning, and we've got some sessions that will take us beyond the session that Yvonne had introduced us to strategic planning and begin to look a little bit further down the line. And then we have a whole section on policy and influencing. Here, we're going to pick up on some of the nuances that Steve has introduced today about groups, but we're going to try and look at how we move those into the influencing arena, those voices into the influencing arena. We're also going to look at broad things like systems thinking and facilitative processes that you might want to use as part of the engagement agenda. So we've got a full-on program coming up, and we wanted to just give you a heads up because this is about you, it's about the journey we've been on, and it's about us trying to enable you to move forward. So it makes sense in terms of the research we undertook. It made sense of the voices. Going back to the point that Steve is making, is how are we using those voices to enable us who have given those voices some sense? And the sense we can do within what we can do is what we're doing at the moment. So we thank you for taking part and for continually supporting us. And we look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks' time when we start, let's call it phase 2 for want of a better phrase, the next round of seminars. Thank you all very much for this evening. And we've enjoyed the last couple of weeks and months, and we hope to continue up and through the end of March. Wonderful. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you all.